I'd love to just get kind of a 2-minute breakdown of who you are, your journey, and because we both went to Imperial College, London. I'd love to also hear your take on kind of what were your takeaways out of that experience going into your career.
Okay, yes, a lot.
Let's take it piece by piece.
Yeah, exactly. So currently I'm an investment manager at Sterling Investment Management. So there's kind of too many managements here. So we are a fund, and we invest predominantly in the listed market. I'm relatively new. It's been about 2 years with them. But I focus on mainly the private deals. So there's a percentage of that fund into private deals, mainly early stage. And because of my technical background, I'll explain in a minute. So my role at the fund primarily is two parts. I do the full A to Z, or the deal flow from deal always to close on the private deals. But on the listed, because they are out there in the market, you don't need to go and find them. I generally look at the technical and commercial due diligence. And really, we're looking at different technologies across a whole breadth. And again, mainly the fund focus on small cap and early part of the small cap and an early stage mid cap. So really talking about companies from 0 to about 200 million pound turnover. And of course, depending on the type of valuation, whether it's a DeepTech, CleanTech, hardware, software, there are different multiples. So that's kind of my current role. Bit of background, last 10 years, I kind of got into the investment industry, mainly corporate finance. Again, the same sectors that I knew as in my experience, and I can lead you to this one in a second. So really, if you go from my graduation from Imperial College, I went to Imperial in 1989, so it tells you it's been a while. I studied material science engineering, and then I did postgrad in Sheffield control systems. Then I worked literally across different industries in manufacturing, process improvement, really the whole breadth from sales, on the shop floor, product design. I'll spend a lot of time on product design and procurement. And really, my breadth, I kind of covered everything: automotive, wind energy, marine, recycling. And many of those companies grew very rapidly. That's why I also focus on the early stage up to 100 million, because a couple of the companies I joined, they were just under 10 million, and with a few years they got to 30 million sales. Another company was about 10 million. It's gone to about 60 million in 4 years. So I've seen real growth, and I was very much involved in that growth. So that's why kind of the passion of growth, but the passion of, in business has been even earlier. And then I had a business for 10 years in smart cities. So mainly it's one of those experiences. You think you have a great idea, you start, you make lots of clients, and then over time, technology changes, market changes, recession hits. And that's a good lesson, getting smacked, punched, kicked, all at the same time, as I mentioned in our last conversation. And that kind of gave me the impetus to get into the investment field from, say, a VC fund manager aspect. And the reason is mainly, rather than me committing all my time on one company by being an investor, I'm more of a capital allocator. So I de-risk. So it's a different skill set, but possibly I might not make as much, say, money, but it's mainly more risk averse than having your own business. However, if there's an opportunity comes in a company that I really like, and there's an opportunity to join them or, be part of the company as a non-executive, the possibility is endless. But I think it's, for me, obviously it's been quite a journey, nearly 30 years experience. I have the both side of the coin, the actual engineering, technical, be part of a business, seeing growth. And then now I'm from the other side looking at the investments.
Well, I think you're the first person to say that VC is risk averse. Anyway, I think most people see it as like for people with high risk appetite. But it's really interesting, actually. So if you were to go back into kind of starting another company, would it be in the hard tech kind of climate space again? Or would it be kind of any idea that you saw opportunity in?
Yes. So, okay. There's a lot of misconception on the naming. So let me just clarify this first. So the areas I focus on is clean tech, stroke, deep tech, stroke, and technology. So really the term clean technology, let me refer to this one. It came out in the early 2000s. And the idea behind that is any business that remove pollution. And that's everything: renewable, solar, wind, waste management, the whole shebang, let's say, But then as time went on, say by 2008, 9, that's kind of the end of the clean tech. And then literally the term climate tech, sustainable tech, green tech, you start having all these names coming up more like the 2016 kind of the symptoms.
I was thinking that, dude, what was the trigger behind that? Because I know I was probably too young to kind of really be into it and remember it, but kind of in the 2000s there was a clean tech boom, so to speak, which then,
yes,
if I'm not mistaken, kind of died down a bit and has come back in the last, let's call it 5 to 10 years. Can you kind of like point to any drivers as to why that happened?
Yes, so that's kind of where back to the deep tech space, where basically high capital investment, and people label it more in the AI, deep heavy infrastructure. So back to your terminology, all these technologies in engineering process, it always existed. Okay, so it's nothing new about it. It's just the labeling is relatively new. So it's kind of hard to say what triggered it. Now, what the trigger was when I started my career in the early 90s in the wind energy composites, that is when you have the symptoms of, to give you an example, the wind energy really kicked off in this 1973 in Denmark and we have, I think it's called the Orange Revolution. Do check me out, I might be not exactly. Basically, you have the oil prices, the war between the Arab-Israeli war, the price of oil, I think quadrupled, gone from next to nothing to $33 a barrel, which is, in those days is a lot of money. And then the West couldn't get access. So Denmark, being in a very awkward position, focused on wind energy. And they became the leaders in wind energy. So all the big players in wind energy are from Denmark, by the way. So you have Vestas, Aero Laminate, LM. Now, so that's kind of kicked in 1973. And what happened is, as the European Union also moving in Germany and many of the Scandinavian countries moving to that space, the problem with technology, again, I'll go about technology like step changes. Before they used to have wood or metal to wind blades, and there was a limit, say 10 meters a blade lengthwise. But once they gone into composites, and that's because I studied materials, so I know about composites, and composites like glass fiber, reinforced plastic, carbon fiber, and you have armored or Kevlar, which basically what the material is you, for the same weight, you get 10 times the strength or 100 times the strength, depending on what material you use. So, you're basically building a structure a lot bigger with fraction the weight. So then what happened is you get this adaptation of this technology, say around probably the 80s. And remember, we're still in the Cold War. So by the, let's say, late 80s, when the Cold War ended, you have this flood of wind, basically composite materials free in the market. So that's kind of a substitute because a lot of the manufacturers used to use it for aerospace. Now they're switching it for volume because they need volume to take that market. Hence, the wind energy took off, and there's a lot of subsidies around that space. So that's kind of what the climate, say the wind energy kind of space kicked in. So a lot of the companies we were installing, the company is Structural Polymer Systems that got bought by Zoltech at one time, and then they got rebought. The same team bought, SB Systems team rebought them, and then they got bought by Gurit. So I left just before they got bought by Gurit, which is a Canadian chemical company. So what happened, what I kind of referred to your question is, you have this evolution of, also you have Greenpeace been pushing for environment friendly. There's a less dependence. There's, again, in 1973 under Carter, he basically trying to make the United States less dependent on oil. So there's all these movements. But once you have other presidents come in, they kind of relax it. So now actually United States is more dependent on oil than it used to be. So it's kind of, again, with we having all the problem with 2008, a lot of the policies in terms of preventing banks' failures since after the deep recession in the early in the 20s, in the 30s, late 20s, early 30s, what happened is over time, again, these regulations will relax slowly. So what you're having is like these phases. That's what kind of getting the message across. So you have this huge movement, European Union and subsidy and wind energy that took on. So that's kind of seeds of clean technologies. By 2000, you're having kind of two bubbles. You have the bubble of the technology, the software, the .com with the bubble, and you have kind of running in parallel the clean tech. I think what people misunderstood, and this is where it's very clear, even when I look at investments, is you have to distinguish between, rather than saying, and this is where the term deep tech is kind of saying, what is really deep tech is high capital investment. It's not so much just high capital investment, is you creating something new. So you need to invest a lot of capital into it. Now, the question is you could sometimes invest. You have to also look at it not just in terms of how much capital you put in, as how much capital your return on the investment. So I think we discussed a couple of questions last time, a couple of companies. So kind of give you a flavor of what can be deep tech. You can make substantial money out of it or return. I'm keeping the language less financial, by the way. So, I'm talking money, rather I should be saying capital or return on investment. Kind of keep that multiple, like you invest $1, you get say 10, 20, 30, versus if you invest $1 and you make 20%, So, and that's what kind of why VC becomes more popular in that space. But there's a cautious like this in my conversation. So let me go into an example. So there's a company which I spoke with them. They are called Carbon Cycle Limited. They're based in the UK. They have what they are trying to solve. Again, it's in the clean tech, deep tech space. Is when you are mining for phosphate, phosphate is used for plants. So you have nitrates, which you think of it as the building block of the plant, which is amino acid. But the phosphate, think of it as the builders. So you want, the bricks and you want the builders. So that's where the phosphate fits in. As a byproduct, you got phosphate gypsum. And that byproduct is equivalent of 300 million tons a year worldwide. And to give it a context how big a problem it is, and I say a problem because it is basically a dry toxic waste. It's not extremely excessive toxic waste like radiation, but it's in the category. So what people would do, or companies would do, would basically line a land and then lay the phosphate gypsum on top of it, so prevent it from leaching into the ground and obviously to the water table. That's in the Western world. In some countries, they just obviously dump it exposed. Now, what this company is doing, and about 300 million tons, to give you, because it's the density 1.2, so actually if you do the maths, it's roughly 200 million square, so 200,000. I got my numbers now a bit. I think it's 300 million. Yeah, it becomes about 200 million. So basically, if I were to cover that volume, it will cover United Kingdom by 1 meter. And do check them. I did do the math a while back, and it does work out. So trust me on that bit. So it's a huge volume. So here we have a clean technology that, one, we cover the market. It's a big market opportunity. So what this company would do, would take that and turn it to literally gypsum, which is a building material. And gypsum is used in many applications. really three main. It's obviously mainly in the construction industry, and it's neutral. So you could use it for plaster board, you could put for plaster, and also a big chunk of it could be used in cement industry. Also, when you're making steel, you get limestone, so it kind of fits in that area. It's interesting that this company kind of started on the carbon capture theme and then end up going into this, and now carbon capture is coming again. Now, what they have done, they've basically done this process. Now, we kind of go more into detail into maybe the valuation or what you think about it. So here is an opportunity that this company, in effect, creating a process which they would license, and then the cost of maybe, say, 10 million investment, let's say for argument's sake. I'm not going to specify the numbers, but they're not far off.
And quickly, what does licensing a process look like? So are we talking about not building up your own plants and your own factories, or instead talking about licensing the technology?
So what they do, they come up with a process, say a formulation. They obviously would patent it. They would test it to the scale that the plant would need to. And that's generally, if I would kind of, I'm kind of sidetracking a bit. So basically, in a process, and that's even when I was in composite in the chemical industry, what you do, you kind of think of it like 3 stages. Stage 1, you come up with a process, say producing 1 gram a day in a lab. And then you would say put a patent on it to prove the concept. Then you would spend a substantial amount of money, say £1 million or a couple of million, to actually build a plant, a small plant that can say 1 kilogram a day. So now you move 1,000 multiple, and you will do the other tests. You kind of, now you are more of a bigger volume. So you statistically you have more data this way. Then you get a third stage where you might be spending a £5 million on a process. That's why I say the combined effects may be 10 million. So initially maybe 1 million, then 3 million, then the final stage is maybe 5-6 million, where then you would do 1 ton a day or 2 tons a day. So again, it's a multiple of 1,000. So every time what you are doing, you are de-risking the process. By the time you get to say 1 ton to 2 ton a day or per hour, depending on the scale of the process, of course, what size of plant eventually you're going to be building. But generally, when you're producing that quantity, 1 ton, per day or per hour, however you specify it, it is, in effect, you seal the technology. You have found out everything there is. So now that technology, you could pass it onto an equipment manufacturer and say, here is the facility you need to build, and this is the cost exercise all done. So now, in effect, what they have a plant. They look at the market. They say, okay, here's the phosphate gypsum market. We could put this plant here. This is the cost of building the plant. This is the cost of processing it. This is the cost of selling it. So it becomes just a cost exercise, and they build a plant. The beautiful thing is after you have that validation process or a prototype plant, depending on what name you label it as, what you do, you basically give the license to all the OEMs you can find. So in the case of, for example, this, you could be building a plant of every plant, say 1 million, process 1 million ton a year. I can't give you the price, how much it costs and how much they potentially could make, but as a license, say they'll make $1 per ton. Every plant they build, they can get $1 million a year per year, So you are now, suddenly you have a license potentially for 300 million a year. So you've literally spent, say, 10 million in development costs, and you pay for, what people, they'll pay for the license. And if you build 300 plants, which is very unlikely, by the way, there's obviously, I'm giving you the rosy side of things. And you could potentially get to $300 million per year on a 10 million investment.
Yeah.
And and the thing is, every plant have a life of 20 years. So you can now multiply that potential 300 by 20. So suddenly, even though it's a heavy investment, 10 million, and it's heavy engineering and this one, you still, obviously the people who are building the plant, they're also making money. It's not, one person just gaining the whole pot,
So if I gather correctly, you're basically designing and perfecting a process And once you've done those things, you have, your checklist, you have a model for how it works, a framework, and you basically sell that framework on.
Exactly. Now the side, if the disadvantage, in this case, it's very good because you have patents, you can lock out the suppliers, you have many advantages. Now, obviously, what you are doing constantly, you have to do is add more patents to it. So think of like an onion, you're constantly creating more moats, more walls to protect that patent. And within a patent, it's not necessarily the patent will give you all the secrets, it will give you maybe half the secret, and the other half it is more the experience as you build the process. So so people, even though they would have the patent, they wouldn't have that part of the secret. So that's how you in effect you're creating a moat around your technology.
Is there not an element of time risk a little bit in terms of
Good point. To couple of things you point out this one. So it takes time to put a patent, come up with an idea first, so process. It takes time to get the patent. Of course, there's patenting, there's ways to accelerate it. Also, the patent has a life. So there are ways you can extend it, and there's other ways you can lock the industry. So again, if you're spending, say, say 1 year to develop a patent, and it took you, say, 20 years to put it into a process to actually validate the process, you pretty much wasted that patent's life. There is a lot of people in the medical industry, they are trying to extend the life of patents. And it varies from one sector to another. So they might add another 10 years because the time to actually put the validation is getting longer and longer. So,
but I mean, even from the technological point of view as well, right? I mean, is there not a case where technology or some other superior process could catch up in the time that they're, patenting out, validating the patent, selling it on to their customers who now have, who are potentially locked in for however long they plan to use the plant before a new incumbent comes along?
Yes, that could be very possible. It depends on who you're dealing with, but usually with the heavy engineering, if you can lock up your supply. So like, one of these companies, this is a public domain. They partner with already an OEM. So they, in effect, you lock the industry in directly, through partnership. So that's how. So when you are looking for deep tech, you're not looking at just one thing to create a moat around your technology. Patent is one of them. You're locking the suppliers, locking the resources where you're getting the material from. You're locking the customers. And generally, these industries is slow moving. So even if a competitor wants to move in, they'll probably take them about the same time.
But
so it's not like, suddenly I'm going to go 10 times faster than you.
It raises the same question as well, because I was speaking to someone earlier who is working on a construction or manufacturing startup in like kind of IoT sensors and stuff like that. And he said kind of there is a huge wave to be moved, or huge kind of like mass to be moved when a new incumbent joins, and trying to get all of these, the likes of Bosch and Siemens and these kind of big industrialists to kind of adopt a new player. Is that not the case for any startup coming in the space? I understand once you're in there, you're kind of in there, and there's that displacement effect. But how can a new entrant actually kind of break into that?
Well, as I said, it's a forging partnership. So, for example, that company, it's when, say, a phone, you want to build a phone. You don't go and start building a new phone. What you do, you might be the one who's designing the screen or building a button or something, or the casing. So you kind of get to know the ecosystem, you go to build that relationship, and then you add in another feature and another feature or another bit. So the same in that process, it's just too big. So a company will, in effect, what they are doing, like building a car, like Elon Musk is doing with Tesla, is building almost everything from scratch. But somebody's building the batteries for you, somebody's building the engine for you, somebody's the carburetor, so everybody kind of specializing a bit. And what you are doing, you are bolting on a new technology to an existing product, and then you expand from it. You start small, you work your way big, and depend how big you want to, and sometimes it's not worth, you might be thinking, okay, I'll do this bolt onto the phosphate gypsum. Another one would be maybe in sulfur. I don't know. It could be other application. And the industry kind of, you could map it. So it's a group of companies, say they're just specializing around the phosphate gypsum. There's others. So like the mining companies, sometimes some of them are just specialized in, say, rare earth elements or precious metals, or it could be highly commoditized materials like nickel, copper. You get these specialities. So you are in effect finding your niche in a particular area. I'm kind of now moving a bit into software because, Peter Thiel, when he wrote his book 0 to 1, I don't know if you've read it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Essential reading.
So if you
essential
have
reading.
read, yeah. And same thing, his concept is exactly the same. Find a market that nobody is in it and be the number one in it. Now, it doesn't matter how big it is to start with. What you are doing, you're creating an area within that sector. It might be a market worth $50 million a year, potentially. And what you become the number one, the main player in there. You capitalize on that 50 million.
Big fish in a small pond kind of mentality.
Exactly. And then you got to then jump to the next market. So it's a bit like Amazon went into books, then went to CDs, and then expanded, and now they're everything.
Getting your kind of beachhead and then being able to expand out. I think Crossing the Chasm is another book that I've read. It's very popular that explains that concept really well, about how kind of the big tech companies of the 80s and 90s and all the software companies coming into the new millennium all focused on a beachhead market of very kind of strong supporting customers that could really buy into their core offering before expanding out. I mean, you look today at something like IBM, for example, or even Apple, just computer hardware and software and these offerings and this and that and the App Store, and trying to kind of do all of it at once as a founder can be, fatal. And I just want to quickly tie that back to the point you made about hard tech, because I think it's quite an important point that is missed a lot. A nice analogy that I've seen is kind of skateboard to car. So instead of, building the car, the Tesla, whatever, in the first place, and trying to get all the components together, build the smallest prototype you can possible that's actually functional, that you can get in front of customers quickly, that can then kind of be developed and built out. And then maybe from a skateboard, you build the proverbial bicycle, and you build a motorbike, and you build a car. So each prototype gets more and more complex, but it still has utilization at every step.
Yeah, but you have to also think of it from an investment point of view, and also for your survival. The reason why it works is not just it's easier, kind of, rather than trying to build a million things, you're just building one or two items, and obviously the complexity is less. It's a cash flow. If I'm going to invest in you 10 million, trying to build a car company will need a billion, for example. But to build, say, a small widget, or I've actually worked in a company that all they did was the plastic interiors, all the washers, all the gaskets. That's their business. There's like £30 million turnover business. All it does is pressing the springs, So, all that you need to do is, and that's the point, they started literally with selling one component out of rubber, press it, to cut it to shape or form or whatever. And from that, they had enough money or capital to keep the business running and expanding. And very quickly, they kind of monetized the whole gasket market, and again, this company is in the early 90s when I first joined them as a graduate trainee. So that's how they started. And I was lucky because the second generation, the founders, basically his son, was already there, so you know the true stories of exactly what happens. So yes, exactly that. You start small, you get your cash as quickly as possible, and you move on. Because if we think about, say, every 7 to 10 years we're having a downturn, so if you raise money, capital, within 7 years you've got to be as independent as possible, stand on your 2 feet. So it's better just to do something small, to skip that chasm, that if the market turns against you. There's a point about this crossing the chasm, which comes back to manufacturing readiness, design readiness, is what is used in NASA a long time, still used. I don't know, because you did aerospace, I'm sure you know about it, where an idea would be, if we have a coffee, it will be manufacturing or design readiness is like 1. But by the time you reach 7, 8, the product is ready for commercialization. But the thing is, every time you go step from 1 to 2 is a multiple of 10. So think of it, you have to go through a million steps. Now, just, manufacturing ready is 1 to 10. it's nice, but you still need to make many times of tens the same effort to get to the millionth step. So every time you move one step high, it actually gets up 10 times harder. So, that's why they call it also the valley of death, because you are literally spending more and more. And validation. So one company I know in the electrolyzer space, hydrogen electrolyzers, they spent on 4, I think, full-time engineers or 5 engineers for 2 years full-time. All they needed to do is to certify their product. So if every engineer costs £50,000, probably another 50,000 for everything, travel cost. That's for argument's sake. You're talking about $500,000 per year, because there's 5 engineers, 2 years. That's £1 million just to certify the technology. You built it, but in order to get it ready, because again, you have to think of it also the sector, like in the energy space. If it's going to be a device, as I know a company in Denmark does, basically an electrolyzer for methanol. And so it's an independent, like a micro generation space. It's independent from the grid system. So you don't need as much certification. But if you are actually bolting directly to the grid system, you have a different ballgame. So you have to satisfy the big end. So again, you could then pick a product that you could sell and then sell it to a smaller market, or a market doesn't depend on so much certification. Get your name out there, get some sales, and then you could move on to the bigger.
I've definitely heard this argument for nuclear, actually, for kind of like SMR for small like reactors, as a proposed solution, kind of either as a bridge towards this kind of idyllic future of nuclear fusion, or to work alongside against renewables. I wanted to get your take on that, actually, since you kind of touched on CleanTech at the start. I've been seeing so much on social medias and LinkedIn recently, people kind of spatting over, for example, the new cables going under from the proposed mechanism from Morocco up to Europe to transfer all the solar energy there, and people kind of arguing whether it's a responsible thing to do or not. I wanted to kind of know your stance on renewables versus nuclear fission in the coming decades, and whether, for example, was Germany right to shut down the plant that they did recently? Was that a smart move?
Okay, that's quite a big question. Okay, a decision like this on a national power, you have to consider a couple of factors. Now, for example, in this, and I'm going to a Second World War in Germany, the Nazis, when they took power, this is in 1933. The price of oil, I think, I can't remember exactly, let's say it was 20 cents, say, per barrel. But they decided to do synthetic oil through the use of coal. And they were spending, say, like $20 or whatever the Deutschmark at the time, a huge factor, a factor of 100. The only reason they did it, because he knew he's going to go to war and he needed security. So when you are dealing, so this is like a story like, nearly 100 years ago. Well, not that long ago, but anyway. So the same thing with when you're talking about a country's energy source, it's not just about the cost effectiveness. You have to add into account security. You're adding you kind of stacking different reasons. So sometimes it might, for my opinion, to shut down a nuclear power station now would be probably a bad idea, because you already have it there. You just make it run for another maybe 5 years, and then you might shut down when you have enough capacity through other means. So sometimes you build networks. For example, you might building a couple of extra roads, or when you're building an internet network, you have a bigger web. Just in case if a line gets cut off, you have a secondary line or a second or third route to come by. So kind of to make that decision, it's not as easy as straight, it's bad and good. You have to consider everything. If it's something to do with it on a national level. If it is more a local, like a village, then yes, you could then question, maybe if I'm a village of 50 people, I might build my own microgeneration on anaerobic digestion, which is basically all the food, anything biological, you want to throw your food, anything. You could maybe generate gas, you generate fertilizer. So you kind of reduce your consumption, the local consumption, and everybody. So in Germany, there's a company, I can't remember what it's called, where they built something like hundreds of these micro generations in anaerobic digestion. They're not very efficient, but for a village, it's perfect. Or for a small facility that may be producing a lot of biomaterial, that's maybe perfect. So again, when you're looking at also the energy, it's not, you can't just say, or solar. So think of a curve, like also every type of technology, say whether you are dealing with solar, wind energy, diesel, hydrogen, methane, nuclear, you name all that, they all kind of have a kind of, let's call it a unique spot or a unique part of that energy curve. So if I want to say travel for half an hour, electricity possibly is the best deal. If I want to travel from half an hour to an hour, maybe hydrogen. But anything above that, maybe it's better to have petrol or methanol, and then above that is be some other source. So
there's really some kind of optimization, right, for each distance.
Yeah.
The question is like whether you want to build up infrastructure and the capabilities to kind of support all of these technologies, or are governments going to float more towards a thing of kind of put a big plaster on it, electrification of everything. Or I understand, like, for example, Canada are much more down the hydrogen route. Whether it will be a mix, or do you think it should all be kind of, let's try and electrify it as much as possible with renewables?
It's going to have to be mixed. One, the cost of turning everything electrified, to use electricity, everything is too expensive. Also, different countries have different skill sets or different demands. For example, China, for example, doesn't have much oil, so they're going through, the coal route, renewable, and nuclear. The same with India. While a country like Saudi Arabia probably say, well, you know what, we have plenty of oil, why should we bother? We'll just go for nuclear. The next, they'll just leap through that stage. The UK, we have a lot of wind and a lot of potential for tidal energy. That would be the way to go. So again, it's horses for courses, and within each, you have to consider the implication and interconnectivity of everything. So, and then you have to also consider some technologies. For example, this might shock the people on electric vehicles. So if you look at electric vehicles, their main advantage, well, there's more than one, but the main advantage, what they are doing, they are moving the pollution from the city, because everybody have a car in no park, and they move the pollution to the power source of that electricity. So in the case of, say, if we are generating electricity through coal or oil, you are literally building more power stations to satisfy, if we don't have any renewable, okay? So case one is we just convert the cars to electric. What we are doing, we're moving that power that we used to fuel the cars, we turn that fuel, instead of being into pumps, it goes to the power station, they would burn the fuel and turn to electricity, and we'll use cars. So in effect, we shifted the pollution from the city to a central location,
and maybe even added to it with the mining required to create all the batteries.
Well, hold on. So that's just kind of, that's the first thing. That's in terms of the pollution as number one. The big pollution is because you mine it once, but you're using the electricity every day. So it's like difference about volume. One is one-off case and one this. So what you actually done, you shifted the pollution to the power station, and then what you do, use filters to clean the pollution in effect. Or you can do carbon capture technology. So there's a lot out there which in effect reverts. So that's kind of step one. Now, step two, if you add another layer to it, of course, you are talking about, mining lithium and everything else. And there's all sorts of, issues around that. But in terms of volume, I don't think it's going to make much difference because, you're going to build a battery once every 10 years, but the car will be running for that 10 years or 20, per battery, let's say. So, the consumption, it's very different. You're burning far more CO2 generating electricity than, you are making one battery. Now, what happened is if we keep that model, we are burning, say, the same amount of fuel, and I'm really being rough here, so don't be too fussy about it. Now, the next stage would be if we have renewable. In that case, then the issue of the power station would be solved. So think of it like a two-tier problem. We first remove the pollution from the city, and then we removed it totally from the power station. But that all costs money, what we call the green premium. Just like buying organic food versus not organic. There's an extra cost. Now, can the economy bear that, or more frankly, can we bear that cost? We have 10% inflation is already a lot of people in pain. So, it's a questionable maybe to reach 2050 to net zero. Maybe we should do it in 2000, or but earlier, who knows, 2070. It's not 2100, 2100 should be. Anyway, the point trying to say is you might have to stretch that. And that has an advantage. It might sound like, oh, we're losing another 20 years. But in that 20 years, technologies has moved on a lot. I mean, I know a lot of companies who are in the lithium space and the battery space, constantly improving the technology of battery technology, cars getting lighter using composite. So, even though we are delaying the net zero, actually, we might come up even with a better solution, because we're having time to iterate, you have time to reinvent things, we have time to look at the issues. Because if you rush into it, you could be making more mistakes, and it's far more costly. So there's that kind of balance.
Well, with the subject of batteries as well, I think it's quite telling that lithium ion hasn't even really been toppled since it came around in the 90s as well. I mean, we have a lot of, as you said, a lot of companies working on things like solid state, things like variations on the lithium ion technology, and none of them has been really displaced, probably because lithium ions are so well understood, the risks are well understood, the manufacturing, the supply chain is all in place. So perhaps we are waiting for a big step up in change in technology instead of trying to what we have now, which is quite incremental.
Yeah, so lithium as a power, obviously, source, so like energy dense, when you look at it from a battery, it's the best, but it's the most expensive. Now, the issue with lithium, most people say, oh, it's not enough lithium. There's plenty of lithium. The problem is lithium is not mined enough, enough.
Yep.
So if the price is very high, what you actually happening, more players will come in to mine it and process it.
Yep.
So you have one advantage in that, and so even the price is high, you're getting new actors coming into the market, new ways of mining it. Actually, I'm seeing few companies in that space. But at the same time, being high value product, you're getting a lot of people looking for alternatives. So for example, in the past, we had lead batteries. Now, lead batteries are really cheap and nasty. So if you want a huge volume of electricity and you don't need to move it, and you can build a tower out of it, go for lead batteries. So the energy cost per unit is very cheap, but you need more of it to produce the same. So the beautiful thing with lithium is the energy density, meaning you can pack a lot of punch in a small volume. And that's why it's perfect for, laptops, mobile phones and electric vehicles. But what you'll find is maybe something like Tesla, they are moving to sodium ion and other facilities where you might be sacrificing the volume, but the unit cost is so cheap, it's worth it. So there is this kind of competition. As the price of lithium stays high, you're actually bringing more innovation into the table. Yep. So I don't know who would win. That's obviously you have to invest in a variety of things.
Is there any interesting tech you're seeing there in particular? I mean, there's like DLE, you're seeing like geothermal brines and stuff like that. Is there anything that stands out to you?
Well, okay, there's a couple of things. So actually, maybe I should have started with this one. So what I look for, I think that's probably where my investment philosophy that might be clarified what I look for and why I'm mentioning a couple of these companies is rather than say clean tech and tech, I like the term of innovation investing or innovation. Because innovate, and that's kind of, we'll come back to my potential YouTube channel and while I have my organization in the CFA.
You can plug it now. You can plug it now if you want. Yeah.
No. It's okay. So I'm basically, I'm setting up a YouTube channel called Innovation Investing, and basically I'm trying to support companies that I believe they have, this is in my opinion, so it is biased because I'm also an engineer, that have potential. Not necessarily where they will succeed, and why I see, and I'll explain the potential maybe in Deal, because that's my investment philosophy. So I'm not moving away from my investment philosophy. All I'm trying to do is right now, the fund I'm working at, or other companies might not invest in them. I could always take them to the market, meaning to the retail market, and say, here is a potential company. This is my study of it. If you want to invest, here it is. Obviously, I have to go through the normal FSA and all the other financial accrements, to tick the box that I don't want to, ruin anybody's money and make it absolutely opaque. And also, I will have a skin in the game rather than other YouTubers saying, oh, this is a great company, put money in it and get my fee and run away. Yeah. What I would probably do is do something along the lines like 80% or 50-50, where the fee, half of it would go as an equity in the company. So if the company sinks, I lose my money. And if it goes well, I make money like everybody else. And the fee would be, the other half would be actually the time, that's what funds do, is they get paid to source these companies. If it's on the stock market, well, it's out there. But if it's not, somebody has to go out there, find a company, researchers, and close the deal with them. So that's
out of interest, what would your kind of, without, spilling a secret sauce, how would you get these companies to come to you? Do you already have like a good deal flow of your own personal brand?
Yeah, I have. I've been in the industry for a while, so that's a plus. And I'm constantly building content. Partly building YouTube. If I can create a platform where companies like the ones I kind of mentioned, kind of the philosophy I'm looking for, or the investment profile that I'm looking for, if I get to know, everybody knows about it, then these companies will preferably come to me. So they think like crowdfunding. Yeah, to say, look, if I come on YouTube channel, Gus have vetted us, and obviously we are that category of companies. And then the audience and the subscribers will know that's the kind of style they want. Remember, I'm only focused on startup or early stage, or maybe even growth funding. I don't know how big the YouTube channel will be and what kind of capital we could raise, but I could see this as huge potential. Baby step, exactly, back where we started,
talk to me then, obviously, again, without revealing your secret sauce, about what you would actually look for, your investment thesis, maybe five headline points.
That's exactly what I want to talk about.
Let's go.
This is what comes. So the concept of innovation comes really in two parts. So you could invest something completely new tomorrow, and you change the market. Now, you studied, aviation, aeronautic engineering. I did a bit in the aerospace. So think of it again, the piston engine, when it first came out, suddenly it became ubiquitous. And the next stage, and obviously gone to aviation. And then you have the jet engine came around. And then, decades later, and then we have, or maybe not so many decades, suddenly rocket engines. And then you have, hyperdrive, and all these different generation of engines that got the speed faster and faster and higher altitude and, and combination. So this is the first rule. So you have something that's new, and generally that will come up from research. It can't just come out this one, and it's probably spin out of university. That's number one. I'll be looking for something like that. The second thing would be an existing technologies where there is a kind of as they evolve. Ideally, like solar panel, it's called Wright's law, which basically is the equivalent of half-life. So every time you double a product, there's a percentage in the unit cost goes down. Now, most people know it as Murphy's Law or half-life. So every, say, 2 years, 50% of that cost is dropped, and, you double that capacity. Or in nuclear, we have the half-life. The point I'm trying to say, there are lots of technologies like battery, solar. They've been constantly moving down like 1 or 2, 3% every year. Even jet engines, every year you become like 1% efficient one. But when you take it over a period of, say, 10, 15 years, it reaches a point where the cost benefit becomes absolutely viable. And this is where you'll see some companies that I've seen where suddenly the idea has been around for a long time. But because everything got cheaper, the miniaturization, the image recognition became extremely accurate, and it can do, spot check in a fraction of the time. You're talking about maybe the other materials or other processes became very cheap. So suddenly when you are processing that product, you become more viable. So this company now, I don't have much dealing with them. I mean, I know the CEO, and I mentioned it. I'll mention the name is Big Six. So I like the company, by the way. It's BIGSIS. So they are basically, and again, everything is in the public, their website, so take a look. So I'm just going to talk about the public stuff. And I didn't invest in it. So just kind of a disclaimer, I just kind of know them. So what they do is they solving a problem that I think is fantastic company. The opportunity is there, let's put it this way, because we have to go through the different stages. So that's part of, again, when you're doing the investment philosophy, it's, we first look at the idea. Does it look good? Does it serve a huge market? Yes. Then you go to the next stage. So this is typical of a bit like the carbon cycle, company, whereas they're solving a big problem. So what happened is when you are the biggest problem for growers, especially in the berry space, so raspberry, blueberry, and the likes, you have what's called a fruit fly, which basically a very tiny fly that the female, and this is critical part of it, the female would make a hole in the fruit to lay its eggs, while the male doesn't. And obviously that spoiled the fruit. And especially a fruit like berries, we like to have it with chemical free and, looking fresh and nice. Now, the data shows, again, it's all on the website, it's about 90% of those berries will be damaged throughout the season due to this fruit fly. Now, that's a statistic on a small sample, could be a bit less, could be a bit more, but check out the website. And they are carrying on more research. So this is just a preliminary data on the public domain on their website. So what they have come up with, this company, is very simple, is they would grow their own fruit flies. So basically they have a female that gets fertilized, let's say eggs, and each egg would then hatch. They would then identify which one is a female and which one is a male. So remember, this is really tiny flies, And then what they will do, they in effect X-ray the males, so they'll sterilize them. And they will take the sterilized males and release them to the environment, just as the season is picking up or starting. And what they are doing, they are crowding out the market in effect. So when you are, for say, and again, it's the numbers. It's for every say male wild fruit fly, you have a multiple of sterilized. And what happened then is the female, even she would mate with the males, they would not lay eggs, and the population mainly would not grow. That's the problem. So as they are eating more of the fruits, they are laying more eggs, and that's why you reach 90%. So what you're actually doing is over that period, you keep it constant. So you could probably save 80, 90% of, remove the damage. Now, for a farmer, that's perfect, because you are in effect saving 80, maybe 70, maybe 50%. I don't know because it's still they have done a year study, and they're doing a second year. And they probably raise money also. So that's kind of company is perfect. And the advantage is why, if you know from the website and their information is because image technologies became really cheap, ubiquitous, high quality, miniaturization, automation, X-ray equipment safe, study. So all these technologies been around, it just got so much cheaper that now when you combine it together, it's worthwhile. I know other companies where Space Retail, I can't remember their name, I should mention them. Now, they are a company like probably they are useful in 10 years' time. And basically what they are doing is they doing basically real estate, space real estate. So they are like creating a ball. And where it happened is when you are traveling to space, you kind of assemble this ball through a robot. And this could be like a size of a room or 2-3 rooms. So basically you're building a space station in space. And the reason it's a ball is because it's the most structurally efficient structure and strength. And you're basically creating, if you look at 1960s and 50s space ships, they all have these balls compact together. So something like that, it's like a series of balls, you bolt it on, and basically you're creating a big ship out of it. So it's like Lego, but instead of, rectangles or cubes, basically balls. And you just put it together. So it'll basically like a miniature planet or a miniature ball in space. And as I said, each one of those could be 3-5 meters diameter or 15 or whatever diameter, depending what size they want. So again, it is a very efficient way of using technology that already existed, but because robotics are better, the material use is cheaper and lighter. So you could basically move, it's like assembling a house or like IKEA of space,
This is like the argument of software getting to a certain point such that it enables a transition or enables a step change. And you always talk about, particularly, I think Gary Tam was a proponent of this. If you're going to be successful, have a successful startup, not only do you need the right idea and the right team, but you need the right timing. And maybe a lot of the technology you've seen before in the past, particularly in hard tech, had all the kind of pieces in place. I can think of, I forgot what it's called, but the first like proto smartphone that came out in the 90s, like was it Magic Leap?
Yes, even earlier than the 90s. It's earlier. It's a very nice I can't talk now. The documentary about it is fantastic.
Yeah. I was meant to also and just kind of all about how it came 20 years too early. So the very basis of the technology was there, but almost like the world wasn't ready for it, and maybe it wasn't ready to be rolled out or commercialized.
Exactly. So again, it's like kind of my business was in smart city is like what killed it partly. We were designing. I mean, the basic concept. Think of it like home cinema, or we call multi-room. You have a screen, a big screen. You have projector coming up and down. It could be maybe an LCD. You have speaker 5.1, whatever. You have remote control that turns on everything on and off. Now, all of these have to be programmed independently.
So speaking an alien language to most of the audience.
Yeah. So basically, you are connecting different things. Devices. And what happened is in the tech space is, nowadays, if you're buying anything home cinema, is everything, the software is in your iPhone already. You pick an app. So it's the term used, plug and play. So you're having many things that now you don't need an independent remote controller. Your phone is your controller. The software is already adapted. It's a bit like when you are adding a printer or any device on your laptop or wireless, you just find, the source. The unit of the actual, say, the TVs become cheaper and bigger. So, you're looking at here like 4 or 5 technologies all improving at the same time in quantity, and the price is going down. So it's a matter of catching that timing. And then, of course, when the iPhone came about, suddenly a completely new ecosystem, basically the app world created, or the App Store created all these apps. And suddenly some of them, obviously, now, we all know, like Uber, and they made a fortune. So that is what happens. Like you suddenly have a point where everything comes together. You create a completely new platform, let's say, and a completely new industry sits on top of that. And then, say, years later, another evolution happened. And this is what innovation is really about. It's not about generally coming out with something completely new. Is very rare. But it's that little steps that everybody's taking every day gets to that point. Also, you have to remember that generally, innovation, there's it's an old book about innovation, where innovation kind of happens almost all about the same time. So when you're coming with an iPhone, it's about the same time, even with patents, they all get filed roughly within the same couple of years, because the idea the germ of the idea is kind of in everywhere. So the German might be coming with something, the British, this one. So if you are coming with an idea, act on it quickly, because the likelihood there's somebody else across the channel or in another country or maybe next door that's already thinking about it. So the execution part is an important part.
It's almost like a completely efficient market in that sense. It's like if you draw on the other kind of tenets of your investment philosophy, one of them being that, you need to wait for tech to get to the right stage and the right price. Once it does, you no longer have that moat of, your idea or your concept that you're coming, because everyone else can now enter the market, which makes it, you can agree or disagree with me, but it makes it so much more important to have your own IP and have your own expertise.
Well, it's actually 2 points. It's really funny, this bit. It's so in Peter Thiel's concept is be the first. In his same book, be the first and spend all the money you can get or raise to become the power law, especially in the tech space. And if it's hardware, it's different, So usually in the tech software, whether it's B2B or B2C, or however you want to do it, because the first 2 players, let's say, who captured the market, there'll be only 2 players pretty much, and you'll see a lot in the tech space that you'll have like Microsoft and Apple. You always have 2, and there's a third one is like nothing or next to nothing, and then maybe a fourth one. So again, it's like
I read that actually. I read an analysis on that. It's like in almost every industry, 70% is taken up by two competitors.
Yeah. So you can see Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and then everybody else is nothing. You get, like a factor of maybe 10 difference. That's a law, by the way, even when you are looking in the max and size of companies, like the power law, the 10, like 90-10, then 80-20, they kind of works your way down. So, and again, with you have Mozilla, you have Explorer, well, now they have Edge, and they have, so again, who is the one uses most? Well, most people use Google, and of course, YouTube is the main player.
Or ChatGPT now, I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
OpenAI is taking the crown.
Obviously they're creating their own. I mean, the other day I saw statistics like 12 million people using ChatGPT every day. I'm like, wow, that's, it's a huge amount. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get at, you have this philosophy, and I totally agree. But also, in Peter Thiel, and I'll tell you one story, it's a British company we all know about, is the kind of the flip. So once technology is being done, the last one who innovates on that technology is also a winner. So I'm give you example of Dyson vacuum cleaners. Now, vacuum cleaners been around for a long time, 100 years. Dyson comes in and comes up with the vacuum, the backless vacuum, and now he dominates that technology. Obviously, the patents has run out, so everybody now is copying him. But the point is, since now maybe in the next 100 years we just have that vacuum cleaner. I have no idea what's the next stage. I'm not. So sometimes it actually works the other way around, because it's your last idea. There's no more steps to innovate on it.
And so, I mean, it even is the case with software as well, because I think Facebook was something like the 7th social network or the 7th attempt, and maybe through some kind of genius of Zuckerberg's, understanding his customer or the way he distributed it throughout colleges, and that kind of unique angle he had in it meant that he was not only to capture the market share, but also improve on where others had failed. I think MySpace and Friendster and all of these ones were before him. If you're the 7th entrance to market, normally logic would say like you're in the dirt, you're in the dust, you don't have a chance. But there is that potential to kind of look at what others have done and improve on it.
Very good point. So I know a very good fund manager who I don't touch fintech. Okay, so I usually like proper solving proper problems.
Like proper problem. No shade at fintech right there. Like. No, it's funny because because I've seen people refer to fintech as like the original goal was to kind of create, value for everyone and to kind of democratize money. And you kind of see crypto entering this market as well. And what you end up is just kind of the same infrastructure with a different skill in it, right? And just 20 different ways to wire your money and this and that. Maybe that's me being cynical, but that's how I see a lot of the fintech space.
Okay, I've been here kind of bit maybe too rude, maybe, or a bit reducing the thing. For me, it's, I like that back to innovation, iteration, right? Solving a hard problem. Fintech, I find more of a service. I mean, a lot of the app is a service, making something efficient, and there's nothing wrong with that. By the way, I'll be very clear. We all want efficiency, we want productivity, But for me, as an investment, I find the hard work, again, back to that term, deep tech. Whether it's a software or whether it's a hardware process, I'm more, and that's probably the bias I am, because I studied engineering. I'm
not even sure it's bias. I mean, I think for both of us, because we come from engineering backgrounds, there is that kind of intellectual stimulation that you get from hard tech. But I think it's also just I don't know. I feel like the last kind of 10 years, if you look at the bull run, or even since like 2008, where, all this software is eating the world, and kind of looking where it's got us. And now you have the rise of AI is going to basically eat up a vast proportion of the software that came before it is going to change the kind of jobs of everyone there, that you're kind of only looking to hard tech for stuff that, okay, what are the hard problems in the world we can solve right now? And I think also VCs and investors are starting to understand this as well and kind of come towards the space. So I no longer think it's actually, or hopefully not that contrarian to look into hard tech and think, all right, this is, some alternative asset class that doesn't have as, longer time horizons and software, is harder to get a return, is more technological risk. I think more people will start to look at it as like, all right, this is how we can build the future of tomorrow.
No, I think they will always will be in parallel. They're all working together. So it's a bit like, you still need to build the house, you still need the wires, you need the bricks, and then you need your internet. So they are in synergy. I'm nothing against either, to be honest. It's just, I think if my traits and my background, and my father was a civil engineer, my mom is a dentist, so I come back from very kind of, let's say, hard engineering, that's my background, and I studied material science. I mean, that's like literally on the nano scale. So I like materials, let's say, actual hard stuff, rather than software. I mean, to be honest, I did control systems, so I should be in software. And I do like software, but it just kind of look at software more rather than retail, more business to business, and mainly solving engineering problems. So that's kind of where I fit in, and I always worked in that space. So that's my bias, and I have to be frank to everybody. That's the kind of thing I like. For example, yes, I had at one point a portfolio of properties, and not anymore. There's bits, I don't like about other investment. I mean, in the industry, people know me. I like private investments, and mainly companies, mainly and generally early stage companies. And again, when I say early stage, I'll have to be small caps, from 0 to 100, because that's where you get the maximum return. Because a company that's going from $1 million to 2 million, it's a lot easier to double up than if it's 100 million to 200 million.
Yeah,
you need more capital. So as an investor,
and you want a bigger pie. You want a bigger slice of that initial pie as well, of course.
No, it doesn't just have to be initial pie, but there's a risk to it. And we had a discussion about where. What would be my philosophy investment across the whole portfolio? So, you could go and invest in TIPS, which is basically, they are short-term bonds, inflation related, adjusted, so they give you an extra. There's different bonds, you go to real estate, you can buy an index, I will not cover any of that in YouTube. I'm just going to give you a kind of a generalized area. Now, most of them will give you 6, 12, if you're lucky, percent. Most of them are, equities, like an average 6. But then again, that's an average over, say, 10 years return. So think of like the IRR. And then obviously it's like last year you might have gone 10% up the index, but this year is 10% minus because the market went down. So kind of it average out. So some statistic gave me a 6% in the last 10 years. Some people a bit higher. And of course, it depending on which index you are going after, whether the SP 100, S&P or what 500 or, the FTSE. There's different indexes out there. The point I'm trying to say is most of them are below double-digit returns, most of them. If you are just going for the aggregate, you're not picking a stock, you are actually going in aggregate. So what if you have spare money? Really, there's the way to create wealth, and I have to kind of maybe do shorts on these videos. It's like the first thing you have to think of, first of all, like let's go back a step. If you have extra capital, kill your debt. That's one. Two, invest in yourself. So it's a lot easier. Maybe you learn something new and or jump ship in another company and increase your salary by another £2,000-3,000 or 5,000 rather than investing. So that's kind of the first thing you should do. The second thing is like if you want to park your money to be safe, but it wouldn't give you a real return, because remember, there's a 6% return, and right now inflation is reporting at 10, or even if 10% return, you're not really making money. You just kind of break even. So a lot of these investments, this is my opinion, okay, I'm stretching that, is you're just kind of holding your money in a safe place and keeping its value. But if you really want to make money, that is when you kind of go into the VC space, because and what I advocate is like maybe allocate 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever you think you could also lose is very important. It's like gambling in effect, and I don't want to give it gambling with PE and VC as being hard. But what you are doing is you are removing a lot of the risk. So it's nothing like gambling is more like a fixed probability. But in this case, no, you're doing a lot of due diligence. You're looking at companies, looking at the market. You're building a company that you're generating wealth for the nation and employment and obviously other benefits.
It's interesting because I did actually have this conversation just before we jumped on with someone else about how they're starting an accelerator, and they're focusing on 8 to 10 companies as opposed to the more American model where you might go for hundreds of companies. I think it's something along the lines of Y Combinator. Do you think that's a good thesis for people to kind of, perhaps new investors or people trying to enter the deep tech or hard tech space to focus on a small amount of investments, because it's still statistically, obviously, the companies with the highest returns belong to 1 or 2% of your total investment? So is it more of a kind of let's go across the whole supply chain and get loads and loads of companies under our belt, or should you go hard onto a small handful of them?
Okay, that's again a very tough, depending on the model you are following and what then your criteria. So let me just finish what it is. So what I'm saying is that if you put a bit, so let's say put 95% of your capital in the index, and you pay off your house and everything, and then you allocate 5% in a very risky investment like say VC, you might lose that, yes. But if you make that, you could make 10, 20 times that money, and it's tend to have a long time. So you can't be kind of pulling out your money, every year or whatever, adjusting it. So for me, to create wealth is like, have a safe kind of pot, and then a very tiny amount in a very risky. Back quickly to the lottery again. You can certainly, and I'm advocate in a way. I do play the lottery, the odds, and I literally spend like 10, 20 pounds a year, no more. So it's not. I wouldn't call it so much gambling, and half of it probably goes to good causes and it costs a lotto. But I will only play when the odds are absolutely in my favor, so you can look at statistics. And only I am more of a fun thing that if it, the stars line up and, they bless me, I can work with a substantial amount of money. And I also know where I'm going to put it. I'm not going to go, I told you, James, I was just going to go with a Ferrari driving. I'm probably 99% of it will go into businesses that I believe in. So it's kind of, would be nice. It's kind of making my own fund. So that's the kind of capital I would put in. Now, back to your incubator model. So in funds, you have the problem with fund, when they are selecting, they are kind of selecting on a bit like what I just described in the innovation, but I also looking at multiples. So I'll give you two examples. So I think they bought offshoots from Imperial. So one company from the energy lab, I don't know them very well. I know about them and I've seen the team briefly. And so they basically came out with a software that can design batteries. And design battery more on around the thermodynamic, meaning the heat of the battery. So as heat destroys battery's life, what they have by designing the right shaped battery and the right components it fits it removes the heat, so the battery in effect have a longer lasting life. And now this is software, it's a good company, they will make money, I'm sure of it, but I would label them more into that kind of consultancy space where an engineer, say a Ford, will come and say, look, we're going to build this truck, help us with designing the battery in the truck or in the car or whatever it is. Now, they probably spend, I don't know, research, I don't know, whatever, say 5 million, 10 million, and they'll get orders, regular orders from different manufacturers and different people involved in the battery space to design, the battery for them. Now, are you going to really leverage that? Very limited. But if I'm a company like you were talking about, silicon and lithium battery, there's a couple of companies where they are looking at a very efficient anode or very efficient cathode. That's kind of batteries, how it's made with cathode and anode. That can be, say, half the thickness, meaning the battery size will be half as big volume-wise, but it will have twice as much energy. Now, you can then sell millions of these units. So again, the process is back to this DeepTech. You could be spending 10 million, 5 million developing the process, the science of it, but the potential of it is maybe 100 million. But to become, so that's kind of, you made a product that you spend, say, 5 to 10 million, you multiple maybe 10, 100. Who knows? Because you could literally sell it in so many batteries. So it's a bit like USB stick. You design the USB stick, and then for every laptop you put a port, you charge 1 penny. Well, there's millions of pennies here, and every year, and also many devices have more than one. My laptop have 4. I don't know, they are quite a bit overboard. Not that I use it, the only one or two. Now I realize I need them for my mic and YouTube. So if you're a YouTuber, you definitely do a lot of USB sticks. So the point I'm trying to say is 2 investments, similar, say maybe capital, or maybe it doesn't have to be half, but one have a potential of 10x, and one could be potential 100x. Yeah. So it's not just about the idea. It's like how it will pan out, and that is one of the things. The investment industry is always looking for. Okay, I'll spend 10 million, but if I make 100 times, I'm happy, rather than putting 10 million and I'll just get 10 times. And that removes a lot of the risk. That's why part of kind of when I was mentioning about the lottery, I only play when the odds are still, I'll say 140 million to win the lotto, But if it's the winning is like 140, like thinking, okay, I'll play that £2.50, But if it's the winning is £10, like 10 million, I feel, well, actually it makes no difference, to be honest. But if I'm going to play that 10, say I have 10 goes to play.
It has nothing to do with the probability and everything to do with the payoff, right? I mean,
exactly. The payoff is exactly fixed. So I would only play when the numbers are so. There are maybe I'm looking into that because a friend of mine who likes to bet and also turf betting because of horses. So he kind of shows me, okay, there's this scratch card is you can win 500,000, but the odds are 8 million to 1. Thinking, okay, that's a better odds than winning the lotto, which is 140 million. You're thinking, okay, so now I could buy 2 tickets, so my £20, I'm trying to make it into 40 pence. Now, it's all fun, this bit. I'm not going to go and spend more than that. So I'm just kind of saying it is just for fun. And so I wouldn't support gambling or anything, but for fun, do that. It's a bit like, as we said, we play both poker, it's fun. But it's when you take it to the next level, it could be dangerous, and you have to be aware of that.
Well, I want to touch on poker as well quickly. I mean, what are the business lessons for poker? Because I know it's well known that like a lot of leading investors, founders, business people, they all played or have played or casually play poker. What do you think are the biggest lessons from that game into the world of business?
Look, it's an, and I don't want to sound racist or sexist it's kind of a man's thing. I went with my girlfriend at the time, separated, kids. I would meet all my men friends, and we'd just sit down, have, something, like Jack Daniels, whatever drink. I would buy Cuban cigars because I get them from Spain. It's something social, among men, 8 people around the table, and we went full on. We had the full table, the cards, the chips, and even on our anniversary at the time, my partner cooked a cake in the shape of a poker table with the chips.
Wow, yeah, it's serious.
Just probably want to get rid of me.
was it a bit passive aggressive? Like, oh, you love poker so much, here's a cake.
yeah. It's like, go and stay there. No, she's lovely, and she still is lovely. But sadly, we separated anyway. But she's the mother of my kids, so I have full respect. And it's been, we separated in a good terms, nothing bad.
Okay, yeah.
So that's positive. But the point is, so back to here. So you have the social aspect. You're with your friends, your close friends, and you're enjoying a bit of time together. That's the social aspect. Okay. Then you have the other bit. It's poker is a kind of funny game. It's one of those ones that, there is a degree of maths, but let's say 50% of it's maths. And I did mention that lady, the book. And then 50% it's psychology, because
what was her name? What was her name again, in case listeners are interested?
Maya, was it Maya?
It was, I think, Maria Konnikova.
Yeah. So there's a few of them,
I put it on my reading list. Yeah, you talked a big talk for that. I'll be interested in reading that, definitely.
I think it's about 5-6 years old. I read it, obviously, when something comes to poker, and everybody, basically she's a Harvard professor or a lecturer in psychology, and then basically she took that challenge to understand the poker mindset. So the thing is about it, it is life like that. You might have the product, but it's how you get on with people, how you see, the opposition, people are bluffing or not. So that's the fun, I would say, in poker. And again, you have money, you have a stake, which is kind of, what we did among friends, we would say put £10 or £20, and whoever wins would get his money back. But the rest of the money, so it's like 10 of us on a table, I think it was 8 or 10, because some days it changes. And so it's like £120 every time we play. And the winner will get his £10 or £20, say, back. So it'll be, say, £100 with £100 each. So we'll have 80. And then what we do, we'll keep that as we play. We play every fortnight. And then by the end of the year, we have this pot, and then we would go on a trip using that money. So we'll go to Biarritz or Amsterdam. So it's a weekend among friends, and that money, in effect, is saved for those trips.
Wow!
So we will all benefit from it.
It's a great social bonding thing to do. I don't think I can ever do that. I don't think I can ever do that with my friends. It would turn into a huge fight and argument. Like, if I won, I'm not keeping my money. I'm going to take your money as well. That's how it would end up. But it's funny because I played a bit casually with friends, but for me, like, I used to play a lot of online, right? I want to be honest with you, like, by myself.
Work online. This is friends, and and they are just as mad as me, I have to admit. Or some of them have businesses, some but we were all kind of a good understanding to say, look, this money. Think back of when I was talking about playing £20 a year on my lotto. Because I know half of it will go to charity. Yeah. So really, I'm only using 10. So rather than giving to a bag, I'm giving it to a cause that it will end up with a good cause. So I have this. That's the other thing about my investment. It has the people who I deal with. Yeah, the ethics comes quite high. Well, it is the highest thing. You don't want anybody who unethical. I've seen, by the way, some founders who are unethical or unprepared, which is, again, it puts me off. It's a bit like Elon Musk interview recently. the BBC. That was a joke.
It was hilarious.
Yeah,
It was so entertaining, honestly.
I just stopped after 20 minutes. I said, you know what?
I missed it. I missed it live. I just had the highlight reel. I was just like listening again.
Oh, even you are even more efficient than me. I thought, oh, this is really made the whole effort. And then, oh my God, I literally spent, I think, 20 minutes, 22 minutes into it, and I just gave up. I said, the guy is not prepared. The BCC, really.
just arrogance. It was pure arrogance that he thinks he can go in there and just push his agenda and not ask anything of of substance or value. And he's just a puppet for the BBC and the political agenda they're trying to push. It's just embarrassing for everyone involved, frankly, except for Musk.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, he wasn't prepared. I mean, if I'm a puppet, prepare something. It's for your own good. It's like, I would want to
prepared defense. I can almost forgive. Exactly. I think you make a great point, because I can almost forgive the line of questioning being so shit, frankly. But for him to not even have a response to like a very basic question being asked of him, like, oh, there's hate speech, what's the example? And he can't even list one, is embarrassing. Yeah. And I would almost go as far to say that it calls a lot of kind of mainstream media into question, right? If you then look at what the BBC posted afterwards about that interview and the way they framed it and the wording and language they used around it, not kind of putting the light on anything that he said or anything that happened and turning it on Musk.
That's naughty.
That's just, it's typical mass media. And I think obviously it's been happening since the dawn of time, the dawn of media. But I think things like Twitter, social medias, especially in the last decade, is actually bringing light to the fact that we shouldn't just take everything that we see in mass media at face value.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you touched on many things. I mean, on a personal level, I feel sorry for him in a way and not. I mean, he should know better. I mean, and he is the technology rep for, the
head of North America. It's just, it gets even worse.
He should know about Twitter's news, the ins and outs of Twitter, and he said at the beginning of the interview, I'm here for Twitter. So you better read about Twitter's history, its numbers, talk to people, and get some facts. I mean, you should know that as a basic reporter. So for him, is on a professional level, he's basically doesn't score very highly. And then the fact the BBC didn't even give him anything, that's it's even worse. So
it did feel like a kind of an ad hoc. I would put it more on him, frankly, because it did feel like a kind of let's dive on an opportunity and just see where it takes us.
Yeah, no preparation whatsoever. Yeah, I don't know the backstory of it. Like maybe Elon Musk told him, "Look, I can see you today in the next hour." Like okay, then you don't give him this. You think, but
it was a bit like that. But even if you're asking the question, right? I think the situation was he had been planning it for a while and then just decided to go for it one day. And then Musk said, yeah, let's meet up that same day. So he kind of had like a 24-hour turnaround. But even then, I mean, there's no excuse to anything you've just said about knowing the ins and outs of Twitter, having a good understanding of who Musk is and what he stands for and what's changed since he took over.
Yeah, there was another incident. This is obviously, it might be linked. I mean, don't link it, as such. I think Jordan Peterson was having an interview with this lady reporter at the time, probably 4 years ago. And again, she was attacking him constantly. So it's like almost the agenda, just attack rather than being humble and being humility. I think that's the thing, the humility. I get, by the way, a lot of founders who would come and they expect me to give them the answers. I'm like saying, hold on a second, you should be the one who's you are the domain expert. So, and that's one thing, I mean, to your audience, especially the startup, don't come to an investor and he knows more than you. I mean, this is like, no. And it happens a lot, by the way. People would come and say, this is the cost. And I said, look, I've been in manufacturing. I kind of know the numbers. Roughly, you need X amount of people. It's a bit like product developers. There's like that many, at low level, master, so many numbers. You can create a unit team, like a platoon, of soldiers, of engineers, of software developers. You kind of have a structure. And for you not to know that, and you're trying to pitch something for me, it's horrible, or the science is not there, or they don't have domain expertise. It's some of the scientists, I've seen a lot of founders who they basically have a technology and then they're trying to fit it to a problem. I think that's a very bad move. I think it's very important to have a problem and then try to find, solutions that optimize that.
It's particularly pertinent as well, isn't it, in like kind of, should we say, hard tech or heavy science ventures or startups where, you kind of get married to this technology essentially, or, you have a PhD or a professor who spent kind of 20 years in the field and has perfected the technology, but has not really thought about what the commercial applications of it could be or who the customer is. And it's a classic kind of solution searching for a problem.
This is two things. So for example, there's maybe software development houses who they specialize in blockchain, for example. That was obviously a fad a few years back and kind of still there, but it's very small now. So they are literally selling you a blockchain solution to a solution you don't need blockchain. So that's kind of their stuck. Now, in terms of lecturers, again, it depends who is the lecturer usually. And that comes into investors. Again, if you come to me, I will have my biases. I have my experience, I kind of built that. So I would be within that space. So I would suggest for people who are, say, researchers, definitely explore other ideas, other people's in the field. So, and certainly contact from companies and build up on that technology. And remember, if someone is spending, all day long, and weeks or years on the problem, frankly, that's what he will know. So it's nothing against the guy. It's just he is kind of cocooned in that space now. And researchers, that's what they do. They research. They don't need to worry about the market. It's like us. We were talking about being in engineering. I'm fascinated building something. It doesn't matter whether it gets built to make money or built for not just for the sake of building it. Like authors, some people would just write for the sake of writing. Now, if it becomes successful, great. If not, this one. So it's kind of back to that. We never really answered that. What about the incubator numbers? So back to that, actually, this kind of links to it, is as a fund, it is I see nearly 1,000 companies a year. Okay, now some of them are repeat, some of them takes maybe 2 minutes I spend on them, and some I spend hours. It's really depends. I mean, I could be even more than 1,000 to be honest, but in actually putting some effort into it, it's really 1,000, because I could go on an exhibition. There'll be like over 2 days, like 320 exhibitors in NEC on, say, material science. I'll scan the floor, obviously, before I go. And then I would pick, say, maybe 50, 60 of those to definitely see. But I still scan the rest of the show. So I still walk and see, obviously getting suppliers. I'm not interested in suppliers. I see people who are professional in this issue, or authors of books or magazines from that particular field. Obviously, I skip a lot of them. But I would still explore some companies, say, oh, this is really interesting product. This is really nice. It's just almost like connecting the dots. So I'm not necessarily talking to them. And I might just come and say, look, this is really interesting. Can you please give me an introduction? But then I'll end up really interested in maybe in the 300, maybe 6 that I like. And probably the 6, and of course, then I report to my boss and, we discuss it and then make extra meetings with the 6, more like into an hour or so, and then probably from the 6 we round that to 1, and even then we will be doing that multiple times. So it's like 1 in 1,000 we would pick to invest in, But in that journey, I would have already seen maybe 40, 50 companies I'm interested in, which I will keep on following up, by the way, kind of saying, okay, let's see what this one will do, And some companies I will come and really like the founder. I thought, wow, this guy is in his mid-20s, is already making headways. And I'm thinking, yeah, this guy is an execution guy, but maybe it's not the same product. Maybe the product he's building is not great, but he's great at executing. And you get the other way around. You get this really good, interesting product, but the founder is the worst possible person. He's all over the place. So what you can do, in effect, and say, if they are in a similar space, maybe they should work together. It's like you get the guy who's really building the science and one guy who's building. I haven't done that yet, but that would be something maybe in the future. You get somebody, so like a piston engine, you get, up and down, positive and negative. So
well, again, this is more of the incubator accelerator model, right? You would come in as an advisor, or you'd have, a group of people that you worked with that would be very good at kind of matching up, teams with each other and hiring appropriately.
Now, being in the deep tech space, I haven't seen most incubators, to be frank, they're not in that space. So I do contact a few of them and I attend, but most of them, let's say in London, there's a lot like fit around the fintech, B2B or B2C, whether it's apps or software. So for me, the incubator space, accelerator, I haven't seen it as valuable as I want it to be, because the areas that I'm interested in happen to need, laboratories, or they are spin-outs of existing companies.
Well, yeah, I mean, so 9 times out of 10, they're all run by the kind of university program. I mean, even things like, a lot of the big names, I won't name any names, but a lot of kind of big universities in the UK that you would just think, of course they have, they have the laboratory, they have the setup, they have zero, capacity for creating science-heavy startups, for spinning them out. It's a real gap in the market, frankly. That's why you see more and more people coming back to their kind of the place where they graduated, setting something up to encourage that kind of entrepreneurship within the science community at a university.
There are funds already invested in that space. I mean, there's quite a few of them, like one of them I don't know them very well, Zinc, and there's what you have Catapults, and Catapults is only about 6 in the country, which is mainly focused for SMEs, where if it's kind of think of it like an SME coming up with a product, they would go. So think of an incubator for businesses. And they are called Catapults, and they have one on space, this is in Oxford, just like satellite application. And basically they have a combination of people who are independent going there. And the advantage of what Catapults is, they actually have the equipment. So think of it like a mini research center. Now, the advantage of that, for example, we look into that, obviously, I mean, it's no secret, is there are already businesses trying to establish another product. So for us, it's more growth capital, or so we are not kind of, you have removed a lot of the risk, but obviously the return is a lot less. People know what they're doing and they need extra capital. They could maybe get grants or whatever, there's opportunities there. And accelerators, it depends on the type of founders. Again, if you are dealing with, we deal also with spin-off. I mean, part of kind of, again, back to the YouTube, and part of kind of promoting myself in this is trying to find these companies, the spin-offs from businesses or spin-off from universities, but the talent, again, it is like filtering the businesses, like as I said, we said one designs batteries for heat efficiency, while another one design a completely new type of battery, similar costs, they both spin-offs. I would invest in the one who would build up new batteries, because I could sell more batteries than, designing. So again, it varies. I have no kind of against any company or any universities. I'm pretty neutral, but as long as they fit the profile that, you are the innovation as something new, or you are, making use of that cost reduction and different technology, and then you have a market that you're going to potentially explode in that market, then I'm all for it. I'm happy to deal with anybody, really. They come in different forms and sizes, I'm not, there's no, was my role, because to be frank, because I do two things. Even though I work as an investment, I do on the side help companies that I would sign and help them raise capital, because I don't have the capital, to sign up with other companies, because obviously I know investors, and I can say, look, here's a company that I think is good. I've kind of done my due diligence. Obviously, they have to do their own due diligence, and and act on that investment. But generally, if you are an investor and you approach another investor, it's more, we have a relationship and a good understanding. There's a degree of trust. It's kind of lowers the bar for the company to get funded, but only would lower it because the person also have to do their due diligence. That's again back to the companies I want to see, or people again, if they want to invest along my side, I do ask every single one have to do their own due diligence and where they stand in their financial investment, because with all the good intentions companies are, building a business is very, very hard, and things can go wrong. Not that the people are in any way bad. So that's the thing. It's like you can filter the market, you filter the people, you now put them on the race, and then they don't win, And it could be the timing, it could be, there is, there is a VC, Bill Gross. I don't know what you know about him. He did a TED talk. He back on the question of timing. So he been investing, and he had an incubator more in the CleanTech. He now has a company called, I love his product, by the way, concentrated solar. So when you have basically mirrors and the sun shines and it's concentrated heat of one. So that he came up with a bit of, took him years to figure it out, but it's such a simple concept in hindsight, how he could improve the process. But I won't bore you too much about it. But basically he came up with, let's say, not so much weighting, but kind of the order of why a company would succeed. So he has like, I still remember them. Let me remember. So first one is timing. The other one is team and execution. Third one is I think the idea. I think fourth one, I think business model. And the very last one is funding. I know the funding is the very last one. Because if you can build something and say small with little money and execute it and start selling it, people would
don't need funding.
Or people would rush to give you the capital. That's why what happens, in many companies, so as they get bigger, a bit like, a bit like power law, as you start have presence, people say, oh, and you start to hear about it and you're creating word of mouth. Suddenly everybody wants to. That's why Theranos, in effect, became even though she was fraud, but had that winning formula that, she's a woman in the Silicon Valley, she's young, and she has all these politicians who are so well connected throwing money at her.
And then everyone wants to jump on the hype train, and you don't want to be the person who misses out. That's the thing. And we're seeing it. We see it all the time, right? We saw crypto or a similar thing, but now we're seeing it with AI in terms of not the fraudulent aspect, but more so the VCs just they see this hype train and everyone piles on, and it completely it can cause bubbles. I wonder if we'll see the same thing with generative AI, or whether it has any lasting value.
Oh, definitely. Generative AI, see, VC, again, you're talking about aggregates, because I haven't seen majority of VCs, let's say not PE, private equity, in subset of that is VC. So private equity, generally, they buy existing businesses. Majority of them, they come from financial background, let's say investment banking, because they know how to close a deal, they'll buy a company and they leverage it, just like buying a house. It's really simple, and they use the business cash flow to pay for the loan they have acquired, the debt, and then over time you amortize. You get two things: you remove the loan, at the same time you build the business. It's a very standard model, and actually, if you want to get rich, that's another approach, by the way. Just buy existing businesses, merge them together, or build it. Obviously, pick a business a sector you think is profitable and you are comfortable to be in that space.
I see a lot of people doing it in the software business, actually, like buying software businesses, either rolling them up or applying their own expertise to grow them. It's a very interesting space, actually. All these little small shops is buying up.
Restaurants, cafes, it's in any sector. There's no specification. It's just, again, it's how many can you bolt on together, how much the multiple of that company. Obviously, a business that with a higher profit margin is more will will give you a return, a higher multiple. If you are an 80% profit margin, you might be, let's say in the tech world, there'll be a multiple of 10, 20, but if you are in engineering, you might be getting a multiple of 2, so the same effort, you're getting many times. So it really doesn't matter. It's just the conversation is about, can you make money? But it's hard work. Running a business is hard work, putting the deal together, sourcing the company. But, it doesn't matter what age. I am not at all worried about it. If you have the energy and you want to do it, go ahead and do it. Just try it out. It's all experience. I mean, I tried, had dealt in so many other things. It's like most of them, it turned out to be all right. It's if I lost any money, is I learned experience and made contact. Like we kind of going to my CFA. When I joined the CFA, I attended lots of events, got to make lots of, and I created my own group, and that led me 8-9 years later to potentially opening a YouTube channel. So it's that skill set. I just did it for fun, frankly. It wasn't anything. I wasn't getting paid. I'm volunteered, and I was doing like 20 events the last year. I was doing like 20 events a year. So, obviously I have the clout of the CFA UK society behind me. So that helps a degree. But the work is the same, and it was fun. So kind of the next stage is to put it on a bigger platform and monetize it. So it's like,
don't forget that part. Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of an evolution. Again, as innovation, you tried it out so many times, you know what to do, and you take it to that level.
Gus, man, I mean, we do have to end soon, but
exactly.
It's a great ending point, because I can't wait to see where your channel goes. Looking forward to that first release. Just let us know when it's out, and we'll help you with the promotion and everything. We'll collaborate in all of this. Yeah.